Test 1, 2. Okay. Check, check. Good morning. Thanks, Eamon. Appreciate your feedback.
Good morning, everybody. I wasn't even done, Eamon. I love it. I love the energy. Good to see you all. If you are in the building, we are glad you are here with us. If you're joining us online, we're glad you're wherever you are joining us from there as well. Welcome to July. We gathered last week at the park, and then and we're back here for the summer. So it's good to be together. If you are looking for some connection points outside of Sunday mornings this summer, we have a great opportunity every Tuesday evening in the Herbolt's backyard for the rest of July, at least. We'll be gathering we're calling them fireside chats. There's a fire, unless it's too hot for a fire, then we won't do it. And we just sit around and talk and tell stories and laugh together and commiserate together and learn a little bit more about each other. So if you're looking for that, 7:30 every Tuesday. Sarah Jane has something to add. Oh, look at that. What did we What did we do last week? So, whatever you want. Name an official time, Sarah Jane. 7:15. We're splitting the difference. I love it. 7:15 fireside chats every Tuesday. Love it. Oh, July is also a chance to take a little bit of a break. So we don't have branch kids in all of July. We give our teachers a little bit of a break, and we take the opportunity to tell kids that they are such a valuable part of our community. We want them with us. So we know, parents of littles, we know that comes with a little extra noise and a little extra energy, and we want you to know that that is perfectly okay with us. You'll see me smile and giggle at all of these things. So we also set up a space in the back that you may have seen when you walked in. So if you want to go hang out there, there's some books, there's some soft puzzles and some blocks back there. There's also the art cart in the narthex back there. Take advantage of any and all of those spaces. Parents, there's even a couch in the back, or non-parents and you want to just hang out with kids. I'm looking at you, CJ. So take advantage of those things. Also, we are taking the chance this summer to get a little bit of feedback. So if you are a parent of one of these younger kids who attends and participates in Branch Kids, we would love to hear your opinions and your feedback to help us make that program as great as we possibly can. So if you haven't filled out a survey, would you click that QR code and fill that out? Or come talk to me and we can sit down for coffee. That's fine too. So we would love to have as much information as possible so we can move forward in the best way we can. All right. Take a moment, stand up, say hello to somebody nearby, and then we'll keep moving here in just a little bit. Eamon's not standing.
do my best. All right, why don't you find a seat, if you would. It's already mid-July. That's a little hard to believe. The summer is moving quickly. It feels that way around here too. In June, we had 4 group Sundays, and those moved fast. Create was in there, a wonderful week, but it flew by. Last Sunday, we were at Buck Creek. Totally new experience for us as a church. We went there, and Jeff Rukike led us into the creek, and we fished out, quite literally, these little creepy crawly things, and then classified them, and then gauged the health of the river, and Jeff had all this information, and now it was super cool. So, this is already, a lot has happened this summer, but there's still a fair bit left, and with the remaining weeks, we're going to spend our time telling a lot of stories. We're inviting different people from the branch to share. Really, I don't think we're asking anyone to share all of their story. That would be a bit much, but a part of it or an aspect of it. And we're doing that because, in part, I think that it's quite common for us to not believe that our story matters. Because our culture highlights stories that are extravagant and impressive and bright and bold. And so we think that our story is just, what do I have to share? What do I have to say that anyone would care about? But I would contend that everyone has a story, and that every story is important. And that, in fact, if we're willing to listen to each other's stories, it changes our own story. We're narrative people. Story really matters to us, and it shapes us. And I think that'll happen in these weeks ahead. As ordinary people share ordinary things, I think we'll find it meaningful and even potentially transformative for us. So we're telling stories. Today, Nate DeWard will be joining us in a minute. He's brave enough to kick us off here in this series that we're doing. But we're not only inviting people to share their story. In the weeks ahead, we're also inviting you, everyone, to consider their own story. We're going to do that in a variety of ways, differently each week, I think. Today, we're focusing on the beginning of our stories. And to do that, I want to play a couple clips about the beginning of life and the beginning of story. And just sit back and enjoy, see if you recognize these.
And there she was. Hello. Riley.
Oh, look at you. Aren't you a little bundle of joy? Aren't you a little bundle of joy?
Wow. It was amazing. Just Riley and me forever. For 33 seconds.
I'm Sadness.
Oh, hello. I'm Joy.
Let me add this one just for fun. Oh, good stuff. That one, I don't know if it necessarily connects directly to anything we're talking about today, but it's good enough, worthy of showing just for the joy. But that Inside Out clip, right, that movie clip was from Inside Out. How many of you seen that film? Yeah. So you recognized it or remembered it. It's this really lovely depiction of a first memory, and also a lovely depiction of the way in which our memories are filled with all different types of emotion. And I suspect that's true for you. Probably none of us can pull up the memories from our infancies. Can anyone do that? I have 4 years old is my earliest memory. But it doesn't mean those memories aren't in there and that they weren't formative. And in a moment, we're going to invite you to consider some of your first memories and what the beginning of your story was like. But this is what we're talking about today and inviting you into, and Teresa's going to also invite us to think a little bit about the larger story and the beginning of the larger story that we are a part of.
Yeah, every week we gather here to tell stories, right? It's not always our stories, but we tell stories of Scripture. So we thought it'd be appropriate to start with the very beginning of Scripture's story, too. What's at the very beginning? Genesis, great. What do we find in Genesis? Creation, yep. We find the creation. There's 2 accounts of a creation story in Genesis 1 and 2. And then after that, it kind of shifts pretty dramatically to how all of the goodness of creation was tainted. And then it's, how do we fix it? How do we fix it? How do we get back to the goodness, right? We so often glance over the goodness. So this morning we wanted to take some time to really think about the goodness of creation and the beginning that offers all of us. Maybe it's important to remember the stories that were present at the time when the Hebrew Scriptures were recorded. The stories of the origin stories around at the time were not beautiful. They were filled with violence and fighting and ugliness. And out of all of that violence came the world. And this is the story the people knew at the time. So the Hebrew Scriptures records a very, very, very different story. It is a story of goodness and love and joy and delight. What's at the end of each section? God created something and God saw that it was good. Can you imagine or think about a time you created something and then all of a sudden you're like, ha, look at that. That's amazing. The delight that fills your soul. So today we want to tell that creation story, the very poetic versions that we find in Genesis 1 and 2. We want to do the same thing. We'll tell it a little bit creatively. So we're going to go back and forth and we're going to say some words together. But there are a whole bunch of spots that there are verbs. There are action words, right? That God created something, that the Creator did something. So the Creator in this version laughed or painted or danced. I think danced is in here. So let's stand up, move our bodies a little bit. Kiddos, we might need you to help. You can stay where you are. We all have imaginations, right? We all have these creative abilities, but kids maybe are better at leading us in these things than adults are. So, kids, when you hear something like Creator laughed, what do you think we could do? To mimic the Creator laughing. What could we do? Ha 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 ha. All right, the adults did it. Good job. Or the Creator painted. What could you do? You could paint. Yep. So we're going to do an interactive liturgy here. Are y'all ready? And I gave you some hints in parentheses, okay? So you can do it. I believe in you. All right, let's go. Let's read this together. In the beginning, all was darkness, and Creator said, "Let there be light." And because Creator had said it, there was light. In the beginning, all was silence, and Creator sang the song of creation. That was lovely. And because Creator sang, all the stars and the spheres vibrated to the music of Creator. In the beginning, all was still, and Creator laughed. And because Creator laughed, that was a terrifying laugh. Because Creator laughed joyfully, the waters took up the roar and the ripple of it. They ebbed and flowed and seeped and swirled and delighted in the ways of its being. In the beginning, all was dull, and Creator painted. Those are beautiful creatings, happy little trees. And because Creator painted, the sky became blue and purple and pink, and rainbows hung there. The grass became green, and flowers and butterflies danced in the drips and settled like jewels on the earth. In the beginning, all was unconscious, and Creator breathed. That's a big one. And because Creator breathed, people woke up from their sleeping. They breathed the very life of Creator and stood in wonder before the work of Creator's hands. Creator and all creatures saw that it was very good. Yeah. All right, you can have a seat. I actually have some little boxes that, if you would like to, kiddos especially, but adults too, there's some clay and some pipe cleaners and other things that you can make your own little wonder-filled, delightful creation. So I will go to the back, and I will have those in the back if anybody wants those, okay? All right.
In that, we will consider a few questions together. Remember, we're inviting you to think about your own story. And so here's a few questions. What are 3 words you would use to describe your family of origin? You just think about that for a moment. Who was an influential person in your growing up? What did they offer or teach you? And what is your earliest or fondest childhood memory? So I'm going to give you just a couple minutes to think about those. Pick one, pick a couple, but just reflect for a moment on the beginning of your story. Let me invite you to just, maybe if you're willing to share. My earliest childhood memory was coming downstairs. Again, my parents tell me I was about 4, and there was an ambulance across the street. The sirens and the lights had woken me up, and it was someone, a neighbor, who was being taken to the hospital. And I don't know why that's my earliest memory, but it is, at least as best I can recall. So hard to know why that imprinted the way that it did, but it did. What's an early memory for you, or 3 words you would use to describe your family of origin, or someone who was influential and meaningful to you growing up? Whoa. Teresa was 1. Wow. Okay. 1 to 6. A lot of blank years, but 1-year-old remembering a house arriving, a prefabricated house arriving on your property. Interesting. Yeah. What else?
My earliest childhood memory is reenacting the fight scene at that little parade in the first Spider-Man movie when I was like 4 or 5 years old.
Reenacting the fight scene from a Spider-Man movie when you were 4 or 5. That's great.
Or my dad introducing me to Star Wars.
Or your dad introducing you to Star Wars. Both of those things left a strong mark on you to this day. Yes, I know.
Vader was the coolest thing ever. Until then I know he was actually the bad guy. He's still cool though.
So cool.
Well, actually,
Cool
he's
for a
more of
bad
the
guy.
bad way, in a sort of a twisted way. He's the hero.
Twisted way. I suppose it's true at the end of it all. Anybody else? A memory, a few words from describing your family of origin. Somebody who was meaningful to you. Loud. Yeah, yeah.
2 brothers, a lot of boys, just loud.
Loud. Yeah, that's great, Kevin. Yeah.
Still is.
Yes, your children may end up saying the same thing.
Invading species. That's how I would describe my family. 'Cause my family is enormous. Trust me.
Your extended family is enormous, yes. So you said an invading species is how you would describe your family.
That's how big my
Yeah, that's how big they
found
are.
out I'm related to Elvis.
Okay, well, very cool. Love it, Eamon.
I'll like meet someone and then I find out
You're connected.
2 years later that they're my cousin.
Okay,
or something.
okay.
Trust me, I have a crap ton of cousins.
Love it. Anybody else? One of my fondest childhood memories was being pulled by a snowmobile on a sled. That was a lot of fun. Thrilling and terrifying all at the same time. Yeah. Well, let me invite Nate DeWard up. Nate's going to begin our conversations here, and we'll spend a little bit of time with Nate thinking about his beginning. We'll ask him to share that. And some other things as well. Nate is many things, as we all are. We all are many things. Our identity's made up of different pieces and aspects. And Nate's no different. One thing that's true about Nate is he has a role that's a paid job. Many of us might be able to say the same. And his role is to be executive director of Reach the Forgotten Ministry, which we'll get to. That's kind of where we're going to land. So he'll have the chance to say plenty more about that. But we're going to go back to the beginning first. Does that sound like a fine place to start? Yeah, in the beginning?
Yeah. And I think it would be especially appropriate to recognize that my parents are here.
There
This
you
is
go.
their first time visiting the branch.
Welcome,
So
welcome.
Mom and
Yes.
Dad, can you put your hands up? So yeah, I just want to honor them, and it's kind of cool to have them here on this Sunday. Chris didn't actually tell me what the theme was of your family of origin and the beginnings of your stories, so that feels cool. And it's just great that they can be here to get to know you all a little bit.
Yeah.
This might be an emotional
Yeah, it might
time
be.
for me.
It might be.
Yeah, just fair warning. No, but as you get to know a community and you share yourself and you learn more about them, it becomes just, you've become an important group of folks in my life and in the life of our family. So, yeah, to be able to share that with my parents is a cool thing. So, yeah, why don't
Beautiful.
you kick us off?
Yeah.
However you'd like us to go.
Well, I think why don't you tell us just a little bit? I think this is a question we'll ask most people.
Right.
You know, tell us about your beginning. Where did you grow up? You know, anything about your early years, and then we are going to jump quite a bit. You know, to maybe about 15 or so years ago, 20 years ago. But tell us about the beginning. What was it like? Where did you grow up? What are your memories? You know, do you have siblings? This sort of thing.
Yeah, good. So My story begins on July 4, 1976, which for those of you who are older than me know that that was the bicentennial year of our country. And so I was born here in Grand Rapids and raised just a few miles away from here near 52nd and Kalamazoo Avenue. And then fast forward to approximately 6th or 7th grade, our family moved out to Byron Center area, and then I attended some schools on that side of town, Legacy Christian, and then South Christian, and then Calvin College. So I took a very familiar track for those of you who have CRC in your history and Christian schools in your history. And that was my early years on up through the undergraduate years.
Yeah.
And I had a loving and a good house that I grew up in, good family. I have one older brother and one younger brother. And most of our family has been in Michigan, but some family members have moved on. And currently, and many of you know my wife Andrea, and then we have a daughter, Noelle, who's 20, and a son, Micah, who's 19.
Yeah, beautiful. Was your home growing up loud like Kevin's with a bunch of boys? Or was it different?
Yeah, actually, probably not as loud as Kevin's. But yeah, we 3 kind of rambunctious boys in my family, and yeah. So my comparison, not as loud as Kevin's.
Good stuff. So that gets us, again, we jumped real quick because there's just no way in all of these Sundays for us to cover the whole story. So we're jumping ahead now to really after Calvin, right? And what happens when you graduate from there?
Yeah. So I wasn't really clear on what I wanted to do with my life. At age, 22 or so, I had a religion and a philosophy double major. And so you could say, you can't do anything with that. Or I chose to say, I can do anything with that.
Ooh, look at you. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
So I worked for 2 years and then went to seminary, and Andrea and I enrolled together. And so we went to Western Seminary in Holland, and that began our affiliation with this denomination called the Reformed Church in America. And then we pastored for about 8 years up in Fremont. So it was kind of a co-pastorate. But as a married couple, when you have kids and you're pastoring, things get a little topsy-turvy. So Andrea took times off to be with our kids when they were very young. And I pretty much worked straight through those years. And then we did church planting in Florida from like 2011 to 2012. And that leads to the next big transition. Want me to just go there?
Go for it, yeah.
Okay. So when we decided to go to Florida as a family, we sold everything. We sold our house, the possessions. We downsized greatly. We didn't know what kind of space we would have. And the kind of church plant that we did in Florida was a high-risk church plant. We didn't have a group of people waiting for us. We had to gather the people. And we had to just go to places and say, hey, I'm starting a church. You want to join us? Which isn't always a great way to lead. It's not a good party line. But I would literally go to public spaces and just tell people what I was doing. And I literally walked the neighborhoods and invited people to small gatherings that we would do. And Andrea was a big part of that as well. Sadly, though, that church plant did not work out. And it was one of the hardest things professionally for me because it was like, oh, man, I thought we could do this. I thought this is what the Lord wanted for us, was to go here and do this and, be successful.
Yeah, right.
And instead, we were dealing with a sense of failure that led in 2013 of us moving back to Michigan and hitting what I call our hard reset. We had a good family, we had good education, we had a safety net here in Michigan that we didn't have in Florida. And so the decision to move back to Michigan came through a lot of pain because it was like we had to give up a dream. And giving up a dream is not easy when you feel like you were called to it, like you feel like this was meant for me. But in retrospect, like some years later, I can see how God used those really hard events in my life to shape and mold me for the kind of work that I do and the person who I am today. And I think that that's a really important thing to remember when you're going through those pits, is like we feel like it's meaningless. The suffering is meaningless. And to be reminded that it's not meaningless.
It shapes us, yes. It can. It can shape and form us in really important ways that success might not, right?
Right.
This is one of the harder, if not hardest, lessons of life, is that failure is almost needed. And that just rubs against everything in our culture, and then when you mix in a sense of calling, when there's God involved in it,
Right.
whoa, now we've added a layer that only makes it more complex and potentially, again, as you said, painful, right?
Yeah. Can I highlight one
Yeah,
scene
please.
from my
Yeah,
life?
yeah.
So the turning point for me that really, you can draw a straight line from my church planting experience to what my current work is, working in a jail ministry. My family had already moved up to Michigan, and I was like packing and getting the house in Florida finally packed and getting it ready to come north. And there was a shooting. It was the Newtown shooting. Remember that?
Yeah.
So that was, would have been in 2012. And I don't remember the exact date, but I remember feeling completely numb to the fact that a school shooting had just happened. And I remember going, this is messed up, that something as serious as a school shooting happens, children dying, and I can't feel it. Like, what's wrong with me? But I was so emotionally raw from my own pain and experience that I couldn't feel it. And the moment of clarity came literally as I'm crying on the back porch of my house, screened-in porch near Tampa, Florida. And I remember thinking, I just hope that this painful experience of mine can be used for some good in the future. And as I draw the connection and the line between that experience, it was one of the worst experiences of being a person in transition and not having any control over my life. I felt like I was completely out of control of my life at that point. That things were just spinning beyond my ability to handle it. And I couldn't even control my emotion of such a tragic thing as a school shooting. And that was how deep it felt.
Yeah.
And so what I look back on now is the Lord stirred in me a sense for empathy for people who are in transition. And whatever quote-unquote transition may mean, it could be a job transition or housing, unstable housing, or any number of things. But people in jail are people in transition by definition. It's a transitional state of living. The kinds of questions that are going through their heads, heavy transition.
Yeah.
And so for me to actually go through the valley and go, this is terrible. Who's going to be there for me?
Yeah.
And it turned out to be my family and friends.
Yeah.
But it really connected something with my sense of what I wanted to do for ministry going forward.
I'm just struck again by the way in which your story highlights this reality that when we've experienced loss and pain, it opens up something in us that makes us potentially able to meet people who are in a similar place later on. And none of us wish pain and difficulty on anyone, but it does seem to be one of the things that can happen if we can somehow, with time and care, remain open to what there is for us to learn and to experience and to feel.
Yeah. So that transitions to the jail ministry.
Yeah.
Like one of the rules of thumb that I have for working with both volunteers, there's like 900 volunteers across the state.
Yeah, tell us, just like Reach the Forgotten is what and does what?
So my current work is to lead a jail ministry that has 30 counties in the state, where there's 83 counties total in the state of Michigan. And our ministry has chaplains and work in 30 plus jails. And typically for every jail there's a chaplain, and for every chaplain there's anywhere between a dozen to 100 or more volunteers. And so what they do is they go into jails and they meet people where they're at, in their frustration, in their suffering, in their questions about life. Like, jail is a time for people to really reflect and say, is this the life that I want to have, or do I want to take a different approach? Do I want to go down a different path? And our chaplains and our volunteers go in, and they, in a compassionate way, try to ask those questions to help redirect people onto a better path. And so unlike law enforcement, who kind of have to have a stiff upper lip, they have to be like the source of discipline, our chaplains are not there for any disciplinary reasons. They are there to show compassion and to help people find meaning in the next steps of their life. And so I'm privileged then to be able to get to lead that and help set the culture. There's a lot of stuff I can't do, but one of the things I can do in the ministry is set a culture for our staff and our volunteers to thrive. And that has like an impact then on the inmates. Not hundreds, but tens of thousands of inmates every year get impacted by our 900 volunteers. And that's important to me.
Yeah. What, you came to this work coming from, well, maybe a different way to say it would be, did you see this job in your career path?
No, jail ministry is not on anyone's career path.
I see.
It is not something anyone aspires to do. It almost always happens by accident for the volunteers, for the staff, for me. So I was at the end of my rope in 2014. So 10 years ago this month, I started interviewing. And I had just completed a period of doing some discernment work, asking questions about what am I going to do with my future. There I was again. What am I going to do with my future? Yeah. And I was like, okay, Lord, whatever. Like, that was the prayer for a period of months. Okay, Lord, whatever. And so I found myself very open, and I just was drawn, because I'd been working with some men and women who were either in jail or coming out of jail, drawn to working with them. And that was a clue. And so my end of the rope, very open. And then the clues that the Lord gave me of, I like working with these people. These are people in transition. I think I can be drawn to this. I just had to ask a few questions like, do people actually get paid to do this? And sure enough, they do. Well, not a lot of them. But I found myself in 2014, December 1 of 2014, signing on. And the organization then, I was grateful to have a job, but it was very different, and it was hard to be a part of for the first couple of years. I've been able to shift the organization in some respects in the last 10 years in ways that now I'm very proud of it, and it's kind of in some ways outgrown me, because it's got so many wonderful people in it that it's not my vision. It's a collective vision of what the community of leaders have.
Yeah. So no one finds their way into this work.
No.
Or volunteers by necessarily because it's of design.
Right.
So I think what that tells me or reinforces to me is that working with this population is something that most people, probably most of us in this room, have some discomfort with.
Yeah.
If we were to say, hey, everybody, we're getting on a bus and going down to the Kent County Jail, I bet a lot of us would be wondering how we could just get out of it. Because I've only been once, and I can tell it's a memorable experience.
It's intimidating.
It's a very intimidating, yes.
Yep.
So here's my question. What about this work did you have some conceptions about, some assumptions about that have changed in the last 10 years? What might we not quite understand about this work?
Yeah, I'm going to answer it a slightly different
Go
way.
for it, yeah.
So it was a realization that kind of grew on me. I didn't know how to make sense of it at first. And some, as I say this, some of you are going to go, that makes no sense to me. Nate's just weird. But in April of 2013 was the Boston Marathon bombing. And it was two folks who were not from originally this country, but it was a domestic terrorist incident, and their motivations were mixed in with some of their religious beliefs. I remember, and this is kind of my own self-admission of how differently I think sometimes.
Yeah.
I was very concerned about those two men, they were brothers, who caused this bombing. And I remember doing a Facebook post that year and thinking, this isn't resonating with anyone. I think differently about these perpetrators. This was before the jail ministry thing started for me. But over the years, I've realized that jail ministry people who go in and sit with men and women who've committed deep wrongs, that they are wired to care for people who've messed up badly and be that kind of support when no one else will do it. And so even last night, Chris and everyone, when the news came through, I was with a group of volunteers in Howell, Michigan. When news came through that President Trump had been hit in the ear by a bullet, an assassination attempt is what we think. It seems clear now. We didn't know. This was like the first 30 seconds of hearing this news. This group of volunteers that I was with, who had just gotten done introducing themselves to each other, about 25 people, they said, let's pray. And what was unique to me was that they prayed for former President Trump and they prayed for the shooter. They didn't know that he had been shot and died last night, but they prayed, if there's some way for this man to be healed from whatever it is that causes you to do that heinous and horrible act, that he would be able to be redirected and healed at a deep level. These people are different. To be able to both hold both of those in their intention, to pray for both the former president and the shooter, it's a different group of folks.
Yeah, when probably the instinct, I was with a group of people last night when that news came through, and the conversation was immediately about the political impacts. We talked about the idiocy of violence and how it never moves us forward. But no one in my group, at least out loud, was talking about what you just described. Yeah, it is unique. I would agree.
It is, and a lot of the chaplains and volunteers that I get to work with, they are just drawn to that kind of pain and suffering.
Yeah.
And some of them, there's a lot of mental health issues for folks who are in jails. and they're drawn to enter into that space, and they're not intimidated by a lot of messiness. And the best volunteers are able to draw from a deep reserve and well within. They've been through some things themselves typically, and they've done the work to heal the woundedness of their own hearts in a way that they become a better resource for other people. And so there's a little bit of a cliche that like suffering can either make us bitter or make us better. More often than not, our best volunteers have been through suffering that has been transformed and has made them better. And that's why they can do what they do in the messiest of places.
It's quite beautiful. I think, with the time that we have left, I want to ask a question about something that we've talked a little bit about. And I think this is an idea that I relatively recently in my adult life came to be aware of. The idea that a system of justice can be retributive. Yeah, retributive. Or it can be restorative. And I had never heard it kind of clarified in those two ways. And I'm curious from your perspective, which is pretty unique, and from the perspective of your volunteers and your chaplains, what do you see is true more often than not? And what are you hopeful for? What are you trying to move toward in the work that you do at Reach the Forgotten?
Sometimes it's very subtle, and other times it's very overt. The subtle redemptive work that we do is more of like the trying to address people who represent the system of our criminal justice system. So for instance, we're not like an advocacy group trying to overhaul laws about criminal justice. However, one-on-one, our volunteers who can show respect and treat corrections officers with kindness and humanity. One of the sad truths about our corrections officers and criminal justice system is that it often dehumanizes both the people who are the corrections officers paid to be there, but it dehumanizes the inmates and prisoners as well. And there's this collective like downgrading of humanity that happens in the correctional spaces where we work, mostly jails. And so this downgrade is almost inevitable unless there's someone who is treating people with kindness and respect and dignity and humanizing. So the very physical fact that our chaplains are going into these jails, it upgrades the sense of everybody's humanity when we do it well. This is no small thing, but it is super subtle. It is so important to have redemptive and hopeful people in hopeless situations and places. It is not a small thing, but it's very subtle. The more direct things that we do that are redemptive and restorative, it's individual conversations with people. And typically, it's typically the inmates who are just not sure if their family's going to stay together or if they'll have a job when they get out. And about 80 to 90% of the people who are in jail, they're our neighbors. They come back into the community where we live. So it's not like they're off for years. Jails are like a temporary place for people who stay there for usually a year or less. But when they come back, the question is, are they going to be people who are growing and maybe even trying to grow in their relationship with God and their most meaningful relationships? Or did they just become better criminals by being in a group of other criminals? And the choice is actually quite stark. If left unattended, most people will just become better criminals. And that's why there's this repeat or recidivism that you see in our criminal justice system. But with an early ish intervention.
Yeah.
And Christ followers doing what Christ followers can do of providing a vision for hope and a new life, you actually see some pretty incredible transformations. And I have videos and stories, way more than what we have time to talk about.
Yeah. I'm just struck by the word correctional facility.
Mm-hmm.
What an interesting label that we've placed on it. We're going to correct you. And then often I think that is in line with what our idea of justice is, which is we're going to make you pay for your crime. And I don't think that there's nothing wrong with taking responsibility. That's a critical part of actually healing, is owning what you need to own. But we've gotten into the business of, I think, largely just trying to correct through discipline and through punishment, instead of trying to find ways to meet people as human beings and help them become more human, more fully human. Yeah.
And as iffy as you feel about the word correction, that's actually better than warehousing, because in the worst case scenario, jails and prisons are just a place to warehouse people. And it's talked about a lot with people who are for overhauling the criminal justice system, but we try to lean into that correctional space and say it doesn't have to be punitive correction, but it can be you choosing to grow and become a new person and provide a more personal, different, alternate path.
One thing I've appreciated about you is that this work that you do and this conversation we're having around restoration, I've seen it spill out in your life beyond your work within jails. And I've seen it be something that you have tried to help become a reality in many other spaces and spheres. And I just want to say thanks, because that has encouraged me to try and do the same, to try and seek restoration instead of blame. Blame and punishment, which is what I want when there's been a wrong. I want to find the person responsible and I want to punish. And you have challenged me, I will say, not directly, but just your presence has offered another way to think about it that I do think is more Christ-like in the end. And I've been appreciative of that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Can we just honor Nate by thanking him for sharing his story this morning? Just apart, I mean, if you're like me, I have many more questions now, and I'm going to need to have a cup of coffee, and we'll need to continue it. And I invite you in this series to do exactly that. You're going to learn about people at a level you probably don't know them, and let me extend an invitation to you on their behalf, unbeknownst to them that I'm doing this, that you should say, hey, would you like to grab a cup of coffee? I really appreciated your story, and I'd love to hear more. I think anyone who's getting up here to do this would love to hear from you in that way. So let me encourage you to think about that. We're going to transition into communion together, which is something that we haven't done now for a number of weeks after usually having it be part of our practice. And there's this passage in the Gospels where Jesus says to pay attention to the least, and to clothe, and to feed, and do you know what the other one is? To visit those who are imprisoned. There is this call upon us to pay attention to those who are on the margins. And none of us can pay attention to every marginalized group, but we should be paying attention to someone, and when opportunities arise, responding as we're able. So Jesus' call is to feed and to clothe, but Jesus never does that without also extending an invitation to, in a sense, feed us, to give us what we need so that we might be able to go and be those types of people in the world. And that's, I think, part of what this meal reminds us of, but also actually offers to us. It is, yes, literal food and drink, meant to remind us of something bigger and deeper, yes. But Christians have been saying for a couple thousand years now, mysterious as it seems, that somehow in the sharing of this food, Christ actually meets us and feeds us spiritually. How does that happen? Lots of conversation. Lots of theological wondering and debate. But together we've said that something happens here when we gather around this table and Christ is the host. So we invite you to share in this meal today. Everyone is welcome at this table. There's no pressure to participate, but if you are interested and desiring and hungry and thirsty for grace, then we invite you to share in it with us. What we'll do today is we'll have a couple of people up front here sharing bread and cup. There's a gluten-free cracker as well up front. And we'll have a couple of people in the back as a station back there. It looks like Eamon's ready to volunteer. I need a few more people who are willing and able to help volunteer this morning just to serve these gifts. And Eamon, I'll get you started here. You can do this. Hello, gentlemen. Welcome. You want to go to the back with that? Yeah? Okay. Yeah. Love to have all of you. Thanks, Nolan. Yeah, that'd be great. Kevin, you want to take this one? Friends, when you're ready, we invite you to come forward or to head to the back. We'll place a piece of bread or a cracker in your hand. You can grab a cup, and then we'll eat and drink them together here in just a moment, whichever one has received them. The gifts of God for the people of God. Amen.
I lift my eyes up to the hills. This my morning song, where my strength comes from. I lift my eyes up to the hills. This my evening song, where my help comes from. This is the gravity of love. Just as the moon follows the sun, you're all around me. You're holding everything. This is the hope of every land. Just as the universe expands, your love is reaching. You're holding everything. We lift our eyes up to the hills. When will our help come? Lord, we cry, how long? We lift our eyes up to the hills. Even as we run, hope is chasing us. This is the gravity of love. Just as the moon follows the sun, you're all around me.
I wonder if my life could really change at all. On this earth, could all that is lost ever be found? Could a garden come up from this ground at all? You make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of the dust. You make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of us. All around, hope is springing up from this old ground. Out of chaos, life is being found in you. You make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of the dust. You make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of us. You make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of the dust. You make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of
It is such a beautiful promise and a necessary one for us to remember, to sing about, and to sing about over and over and over a few times through, because it can be really hard to believe it and really hard to remember it. But it is true. Beautiful things are being made every moment all around us in this world and in the lives of the people we love, and even in our own lives, although that can be hard to see sometimes. But I hope that this week you'll hold on to that promise. You'll remember that promise. Maybe this song can kind of get caught in your ear and can come to mind later this week. Just a reminder that 7:15, not 7, not 7:30, 7:15 is Fireside Chats. We'd love to have you there this week. We had a lot of fun and a very simple, fun time last Tuesday. We'd love to have you join us for that this Tuesday evening. But as you go, let me offer this blessing to you. May you be people this week who remember that God makes all things new. Even when hope seems lost, even when violence abounds, even when the pain is deep, there is always the hope of restoration. Be the people who hold that hope and who share that hope this week. Amen. Thanks for being here, everybody. Good to see you.